and welcome into RNN Talks, where we talk everything important from the world of motorsports. Hello, I'm your host, Garth Allen. Thank you for joining me today for this second episode of RNN Talks. Later in the show, we'll have our Auto Tech Correspondent, Andrew Moore, join us. He had a couple things he wanted to talk with us about this week, so we have him on coming up a little bit later in the show. We've got the big topic that I've been wanting to talk about for a little while here coming up. First, we get a little bit of a preview of it on pole position on Monday. And then we have a little bit of comic relief coming up for you here at the end of the show as well, so you want to stick around for that. It gets pretty humorous here at the end of the show, so stick around for that. And now we're going to shift over to our Auto Tech Correspondent, Andrew Moore. He is here with us to talk about a few things, including possibly new tire manufacturers in NASCAR, as well as the controversy surrounding F1 getting rid of their grid girls. And we are now joined by RNN's Auto Tech Correspondent, Andrew Moore. Andrew, how are you today?
Garth, I am doing swell.
Well, that's good. Swell is better than a lot of other things you could be feeling.
Yes, this is true.
All right, so you had a few things you wanted to talk about on RNN Talks today, and I am more than happy to accommodate you on that. So we'll start off with the first thing you wanted to talk about. You and I were talking the other day about NASCAR only having one tire manufacturer, that being Goodyear. And you brought up the point that it would be possibly more beneficial for NASCAR to have more than one tire manufacturer. Explain your thinking on that.
Well, back in like some of the 90s and the early 2000s and stuff, a lot of racing teams would have like at least two tire manufacturers. Even during the IMSA Daytona 24-hour race for the Rolex 24-hour, they had Continental sponsors the race, but some of the GTLM cars were running Michelin tires, and there were definite differences in the performance of the two tires and their compound and the way that the tire manufacturers recommended they fill them and all that stuff. So the Continentals were blowing out, and when they would blow out, then they would shred, and the way the tire would just disintegrate, it would rip apart the back half of the car if they weren't careful. But the Michelins didn't seem to have that problem. So the Continental tires were failing more often than the Michelin tires. And then when the Michelin tires did fail, the sidewall just kind of broke apart, and it didn't disintegrate and flail around and rip up the back half of the car like the Continental tires did. So I felt like the Michelin tires had a better advantage, and they were more equipped for that particular race. So if we were to accommodate that into NASCAR, the different sized ovals, the different shaped ovals, you have square ones, round ones, triangular ones, stuff like that. Each track is totally different, even their surfaces and stuff. So if you had different tire manufacturers competing against each other within NASCAR to see who could make the better tire, then not only would that be more revenue for NASCAR, because it'd be pretty much like a bidding war at that point, to see who does NASCAR like more, who are they going with, who's going to get more publicity, stuff like that, and just whoever has the most money to pay them or whatever. But there are a lot of tracks that could really benefit from having two different tire compounds going at the same time. I mean, like for the Daytona 500, for example, you saw that Kyle Busch was continuously having problems with his left rear. And that was a tire pressure issue. They didn't have enough air in the tire, and that was causing it to fail. Now,
I don't know if that's a tire manufacturer issue, though. That was
their team. Yeah, their team wasn't putting enough air in. But they get the recommendations from the tire companies to say, hey, this is what we recommend. We've tested on here. This is what we think you should do. And then they go from there. And there's driver preference. So having that kind of issue and stuff, if they had a different tire out there competing with Goodyear, then it's not just driver on driver, team on team. Now you have a whole nother competition going on in there to see who makes the better tire. And Goodyear's been doing this for God knows how long. So maybe to see someone else step in there and try to take over NASCAR and prove that they can do a better job, that might be interesting.
Well, and you're right. Goodyear has been the tire for NASCAR for a long time. I want to say it was the 80s when they were having the tire wars between Goodyear and Hoosier. But ever since then, it's been exclusively Goodyear, and I don't know at this point that we could have an actual tire war, just because NASCAR's in this whole branding thing of got to be the official tire of NASCAR or the official deodorant of NASCAR or all this different stuff. I don't know that we could have two different tire manufacturers in NASCAR at the same time. That being said, I don't necessarily think it's out of the question for them to switch from Goodyear at some point to, say, a Hoosier or Pirelli or General Tire or whoever it might be. But I don't see them having two different types of tires, two different manufacturers on the track at the same time.
Yeah, because I brought up the example of the 2005 F1 Indianapolis GP, how the Michelin tires couldn't hold up to the pressures that they were undergoing through what is basically turn one of the oval. But at that time for that layout, it was the final corner. And they were pushing so many Gs going into that corner and the downforce. There was so much working against the tire that it was too dangerous to run. So only 6 cars ran in that race, and they were the ones that had the Bridgestone tires because the Bridgestones could handle it. So, I mean, you have tracks like Pocono that they're constantly bouncing around the whole time. You have, they call it the tricky triangle for a reason, all right? So that some of the turns are not the same as the rest of the turns in there. And, you know, it could be interesting to see if someone else makes a tire that's better than Goodyear. But at the rate we're going, we'll never know.
But the thing is, the allure with Pocono is that it is the tricky triangle. It's very hard to set up a car for Pocono, and that's kind of the fun of Pocono in that crew chiefs have a very hard time setting up the car for Pocono, given that generally they end up having to set the car to where they're better in one corner, but they're worse in another corner, and they have to kind of make that compromise. I don't know that even if we were to bring another tire manufacturer in, if you would ever get to the point where you could have a car set up for the entire way around Pocono to have it handling perfectly. And I don't know that I would necessarily want it like that. That's kind of the fun of Pocono.
That seems fair. But I guarantee you, there's an engineer at some tire company somewhere going, I bet you I can do better.
Hey, you know what? More power to him if he can. I don't think it can be done. So, moving on to the other topic that you wanted to talk about, grid girls in F1 and the Monster Energy girls. There's a little dispute on that. It's probably been a couple weeks ago now, when F1 announced they are getting rid of grid girls this season. And so the discussion flared up about whether or not NASCAR should get rid of the Monster Energy girls. And Andrew, you had a very interesting opinion on this.
Believe it or not, this shows up in my YouTube feed as recommended videos, and there was a female British driver. She does some kind of GT racing over in Europe, and she was talking about how that as a woman that she doesn't think that by getting rid of the grid girls in F1 that F1 is doing what they're intending to do, because they don't want to seem sexist or anything like that. They're like, well, we don't want people parading around out here because that's not right. But the thing is, no one's forcing those girls to do this. No one's forcing them to wear the outfits and say this is it. I guarantee you they have a say in what outfits they get to wear. They probably help design them, and they're always out there with a smile on their face because this is a job. They're getting paid to do this because they want to be there. They worked hard to get to this point, and now F1's saying, no, we're getting rid of you because we don't want to seem sexist. Well, by not seeming sexist, you've pretty much done a sexist thing by saying, because you're a grid girl, we are going to get rid of you. And the same goes for the Monster Energy girls. They're doing this because they want to. They worked hard to work their way through the ranks to be a Monster Energy girl. It's just like a beauty pageant, all right? There are some girls that live to do this kind of stuff, and they want to be Miss USA. Some of these girls probably are like, oh my God, I want to be a Monster Energy girl when I grow up. And now here they are, and there's a chance that they're going to get told no.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're exactly right. The thing with a lot of these girls is maybe that's not the pinnacle of exactly what they wanted to do with their lives, but the majority of them are like model types and girls that just want to be models and do things like that. And that's just maybe a stepping stone to further them. Whereas if you take that away, then where does that stepping stone go? Because this is something they want to do. And you're right, by trying to not be sexist, it almost is a sexist move by F1.
What if, I just thought about this, what if they're doing this to save money? Like, they don't want to have to pay for the girls anymore, so they're just getting rid of them. And that's just a money saving thing that they're doing.
Well, and I mean that could be it. It's not that they're completely getting rid of that position on the grid as a whole. They're replacing them with kids. So they're finding kids from different countries or wherever that I think already have like aspirations of being in racing or something like that. And they're just gonna, instead of having a grid girl, they're gonna have grid kids.
Well, so the soccer does the same thing with the kids. When the teams come out, each player has a kid wearing a shirt that sponsors some youth league or something like that, and they walk them out onto the field. And they do that for the World Cup as well sometimes. But I know the Premier League over in London, or not London, England, they do that. So, I mean, there's nothing wrong with having the kids out there. I just think that some of the reasoning that they've been giving behind why they got rid of that position is kind of contradictory to what they've actually done. And I know that there are quite a few people who are all up in arms about it, and a lot of them are females who are disappointed that because they are grid girls, are being told no, and that we've worked up to a certain point where everyone's supposed to be equal, but this doesn't seem equal. So
You're exactly right. So, last thing that I wanted to talk with you about, Andrew, while we've got you on here, those were the two things you wanted to talk about. Now, I have something I want to get your opinion on. Sticking kind of with the NASCAR talk here, Denny Hamlin made a comment last week, supposedly jokingly, and I have no reason to believe he wasn't joking, by saying that he believes 70% of the guys in the NASCAR field are on Adderall. So, first off, I want to get your opinion on that, and then there's a follow up to that because that's not the end of the saga.
well, he probably was joking, but there's also a small part of me that believes that that's probably true. It also wouldn't surprise me if half the drivers smoked weed or had edible things or something just to calm their nerves, because take the Daytona 500 for example. That's a huge historic race, and it's probably the most important race of their season, and that's the first time people get to see them drive. So they're pretty anxious. They got a lot of nerves, and they probably need something to calm them down. So it wouldn't surprise me if they did Adderall or anything else. But if that is the case, I mean, I probably wouldn't recommend getting some Adderall in your system and then hop out on the track. That doesn't seem like a smart or safe thing. But who knows? Maybe it's just like my friend in college. He was a better driver when he was drunk. Maybe that's the case.
I don't know if that's necessarily what they're going for there. Obviously, the garage wasn't very happy about this comment by Denny, and that's not surprising because whether this is what he intended or not, basically you're saying either 70% of the guys in the garage are druggies or that they have ADHD. Neither of which is something that, even if it were true, they would necessarily want publicized, which I don't believe it is true. So Bubba Wallace kind of fired back at Denny after Sunday's Daytona 500 when Denny kind of put him into the wall as they were coming across the start-finish line. Bubba ended up just barely nosing out Denny for second in that race. And Bubba made the comment that Denny had done the same thing to Blaney at Martinsville back in the fall, and then says something to the effect of, well, I'm going to need some Adderall to watch the replay. So kind of firing back at the whole Adderall comment.
Yeah, it's one of those where sometimes you gotta just keep your mouth shut. Like the comment was not necessary and not appropriate. So
Which comment? The Bubba comment or the Denny comment?
No, Denny's comment. I mean, obviously, he was going to be under fire the minute he said that half the field is on Adderall. That's, even if that was true, that's not something that you would publicize. You don't want to promote things like that because that'll give you the wrong image. So I understand completely that the garages were mad at him. I would be too if he was out there telling people that I do these certain things before the race that are not things that should be said. So it's like my grandmother always says, sometimes you just keep your opinions to yourself. Nobody cares.
Sounds about right. All right. Well, Andrew, you got any last thoughts before we let you go here?
No, not yet. But hopefully I'll be back on with some more thoughts that I come up with later on in the season.
All right. Well, we've had fun having you on here, and I'm sure we'll have you on again at some point. Thanks for coming on tonight, Andrew.
Thanks for having me.
All right. That's Andrew Moore, our Auto Tech correspondent here for Racing News Now. We'll have more here in just a moment on RNN Talks. All right, so we want to thank our Auto Tech correspondent, Andrew Moore, for joining us today on RNN Talks. And before we wrap up here, I got something a little special for you here. So I was watching the post-race press conferences after the Can-Am duels at Daytona on Thursday night this past week. And after the first duel, your second and third place finishers, Joey Logano and Bubba Wallace, were in the media center taking questions, and these two were hilarious together. I don't know what it was, but they were just cracking jokes left and right between each other. So I thought, we'll just put a montage together. We will put together the Logano and Wallace Comedy Hour here on RNN Talks, and that will be how we close things out today. So without further ado, here is our very own version of the Logano and Wallace Comedy Hour.
So we lost control of the restart, and then the two best friends there ever was sitting next to each other, and I apparently don't have any friends.
I've seen you race.
It's all
before.
coming back to me.
Not anybody's friend.
I know, I could tell.
You still made it a 1-2 finish for the boss, so
Yeah.
what the hell?
It's the one part that you always go for, but
I haven't been there in
it's
a while.
a race. You want to, the first is where you shoot for.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
We're just happy with top fives lately.
But it was.
I heard Joey say, I assume tongue-in-cheek on TV, that you and Blaney might as well be teammates out there.
Pretty close. I mean, they're at the end. You guys worked together really good.
Yeah, we did. Hell, I had to give him a shot. You do pull down
As
on
hard as
the
the time, you gave him such a hard time in here earlier when we were doing the Fox.
It's my little brother. I got to.
Yeah. You guys go play your drums together.
And Joey, is there any reason to believe that a Team Penske car is not going to win the 500?
No reason to believe that. No, we're going to make it happen.
We don't get questions like
That's how
these
we're
in other
doing it.
series. These are crazy. This is new for me.
We're going to come up front to Jessica here.
The big leagues. Did the king give you like that death grip where you're there in your shoulder blade?
It was one of these like full wrap, and
Okay.
then he like walked like this all the way back.
Oh, really?
Yeah, all the way.
That's a lot of loving.
Yeah.
He always throws a thumb like into my
Claw,
shoulder
yeah.
blade, and it about puts me to the ground. Yeah.
Well, that ain't hard to do.
And that was the comedy stylings of Joey Logano and Bubba Wallace in the media center following Thursday's Can-Am duels. Duel number 1 they were in. So I thought I'd throw in a little comic relief for you here on RNN Talks before we close things out. One last note here on the to-do list, and that is predictions for this weekend for Atlanta Motor Speedway. All 3 of NASCAR's National Series will be in action. A doubleheader on Saturday with Xfinity, followed immediately by the trucks. We're going to say winner of the Xfinity race will be Joey Logano. He'll be in that 22 car this weekend for Penske in the Xfinity race. Hard to bet against Joey Logano in an Xfinity race. I don't know that you need much more explanation than that. It's just hard to pick against him in an Xfinity race. Then in the truck race immediately following, we're going to go with Matt Crafton. I think he bounces back from a disappointing weekend in Daytona and gets his search for a 3rd Truck Series championship off and running. And then finally, your Monster Energy NASCAR Cup Series winner, the full Devonner Quick Trip 500, will be Jimmy Johnson. I think he bounces back from a hugely disappointing Speed Weeks. He wrecked out of all 3 races during Speed Weeks. I think he bounces back in Atlanta. He's always been good on 1.5 mile tracks, especially Atlanta. And I think gets that search for an 8th championship in 2018 off and running. So that's your predictions for this weekend at Atlanta Motor Speedway. That will, I think, do it for RNN Talks today. So thank you for joining us today. Don't forget to subscribe to Racing News Now. Leave a like on the video to be much appreciated. And don't forget to support us on Patreon, patreon.com/racingnewsnow. Any little bit is much appreciated. We'd love to have you along on the journey for RNN and to help us bring you the best quality content possible. So with that, that'll do it for RNN Talks this week. I'll see you on Monday for Pole Position. I'm Garth Allen for Racing News Now.